Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished members of the Security Council, it's an honor to be here with you today. As I prepared for this briefing, I was reminded of my first time briefing the Security Council, which was in 2015, during the open debate on the protection of civilians. Reflecting on the situation in Somalia then, and my appeals to this esteemed body, I was struck by the political, economic, environmental, and security reforms that Somalia has undertaken since then. The progress we have made is significant and visible. The hope and momentum within the country are palpable. For anyone who has worked in or on Somalia for more than a year, claiming that nothing is changing is simply inaccurate. Today's briefing presents an opportunity to examine the current situation in Somalia and to collectively chart a path forward that includes often unseen and unheard perspectives. It is essential that we hold ourselves, both as Somalis and as partners to Somalia, to a higher standard of accountability. If we are not meeting this standard today, we must commit to listening and working together towards a future where we can hold ourselves accountable. We cannot afford to lose another generation to war. With 75% of the population under the age of 30 and 42% of which under the age of 14, they deserve the chance to inherit a future defined by peace rather than conflict. July 31st, my organization, the Elman Peace Center, hosted a festival in Mogadishu, the Jil Kamante Festival, which translates to Generation Today. The event was conceptualized to foster cultural pride, empower young leaders, platform them and their contributions to society, host workshops, develop new opportunities for positive identities, break down the barriers to opportunities by inviting business leaders, government officials, artists, and together just dream about peace and live it, if even just for one day. And we did. Nearly 6,000 people showed up from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. in Mogadishu, mostly youth. Not a single incident occurred. And memories that until now, youth tell me was the best day they ever experienced. We knew nothing like this was imagined, let alone achieved in the last 30 years in Mogadishu. But it wasn't until after the festival and what followed why that festival became a watershed moment for Somalia, at least to me. 2 days after, on a Friday evening, horrific scenes, imagery of bodies dead on the beach, mostly youth, targeted deliberately by Al-Shabaab took over the news cycle. The continued and disproportionate targeting by Al-Shabaab of youth, their education, and cultural activities exhibits that a young generation with a shared, positive cultural identity and forward-looking hope for their future is viewed as an existential threat by the group. While youth and women are recognized as critical stakeholders for sustainable peace in Somalia, their participation remains severely limited. Engaging these groups alongside civil society organizations must go beyond mere tokenism. Their involvement is essential for building resilience against extremism and fostering inclusive, community-led reconciliation and peace-building efforts. The need is especially pressing in newly liberated areas, where the complex social and political dynamics shaped by years of Al-Shabaab rule demand sensitive and conflict-specific interventions. Those who negotiate their existence and survival in these environments on a daily basis are best positioned to contribute meaningfully to these efforts. Engaging them is not just beneficial, therefore, it is imperative for lasting peace and stability in Somalia. Among the issues that we see exacerbating this disconnect is siloed approaches, fragmented justice systems, mistrust amongst horizontal and vertical actors. It is well documented that violent extremism in general cannot be defeated solely through military means. Similarly, it cannot be mitigated through purely governmental actors. The whole of society approach may never have been more valid than in Somalia. Yet as Somalia and its regional and international partners, many of whom are assembled here today, have been discussing the security sector reforms, the new strategies to guide the design of the mission to follow ATMIS, and the realization of the Somalia Security Development Plan since His Excellency President Hassan Sheikh announced his vision in New York last year, the only constant actor missing from the table truly remains civil society organizations, and by extension, the Somali population at large, who seek to participate. And this is a hugely missed opportunity. In this context, I take the opportunity to remind the Council that CSOs in Somalia aren't only providing immediate support and life-saving services from a humanitarian perspective. Civil society organizations in Somalia play a crucial role in fostering trust and cooperation between military forces and local communities. Therefore, engaging CSOs in early recovery efforts, such as delivering essential services like water, sanitation, healthcare, and education is paramount. We know this to significantly reduce community reprisals compared to military-led initiatives, especially when the military is still working to gain acceptance in these communities. Consistently, a lack of understanding of localized community dynamics continues to hinder security efforts' preparedness and ultimately their sustained impact. By incorporating the perspectives of CSOs, security actors can develop a more nuanced threat assessment that accurately reflects local drivers of extremism. Collaborating with CSOs for joint assessments not only provides access to communities, but also yields vital insights that better inform stabilization strategies. As Somalia prepares to assume a seat on the Council next year, its unique context positions it as a powerful case study in effective conflict resolution that others can learn from, despite the challenges we continue to face. There are many documented lessons and best practices, grassroots solutions to seemingly intractable conflicts born out of necessity and tested over decades in Somalia that offer invaluable, practical lessons relevant for addressing the rising tide of armed conflicts globally. To effectively respond to today's global challenges, the international community must embrace more adaptive, flexible approaches that reflect the realities of contemporary conflicts of today. In Somalia and beyond, where traditional preconditions prescribed in the past are no longer fit for purpose, a new frame of reference and an updated principles of peace is essential to navigate the global challenges. Somalia has developed invaluable experiences in strategy adaptability, agility, and in contextualizing international frameworks to determine what works and what doesn't. From this, the country has created its own mechanisms that can offer critical insights to UN member states and others facing newer and emerging conflicts. Somalia's protracted conflict, in this sense, can serve as a valuable model for preventing the prolongation of newer conflicts we see developing around the world today, and helping to avoid the same pitfalls and challenges that we faced for more than 30 years. However, for Somalia to effectively leverage this expertise, it is essential that the country first prioritizes the participation of civil society organizations in inclusive peace-building efforts. Additionally, Somalia must invest in and prioritize the creation of a national knowledge repository to document the vast experiences and knowledge in the space, experiences that remain underrepresented and underprioritized. Such an initiative would not only preserve valuable lessons, but also create a strategic resource for future peace-building efforts, both domestically and globally. This commitment is crucial to fully realize and utilize the valuable insights and experiences that Somalia has to offer. Madam President, as Somalia stands at a critical juncture with much to look forward to, the nation's people look to their leaders with high expectations. However, the reality is that Somalia is struggling to address the urgent needs of 2.8 million internally displaced people. Furthermore, the absence of a functioning and effective criminal justice system has perpetuated a climate of impunity for those responsible for violent crimes, including sexual violence, leaving countless of victims without justice. So this is not the time for regress on critical issues and hard-won gains, such as those initially proposed during the constitutional amendments, which seek to redefine the age of a child from 18 years old to just 15 for the age of maturity. This change directly contradicts the international standards and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which Somalia has ratified. With the age definition article on hold currently, the concern persists especially because Somalia has said that at the 140th session of the CCPR Human Rights Committee meeting earlier this year in March, that ultimately the people will decide on the matter of the age of maturity. Until that is possible, in the form of a democratic vote on the matter, I urge Somalia to maintain the age of majority for both boys and girls at 18 years in accordance with the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The primary responsibility to protect the population lies first and foremost with Somalia, and taking into account the gender-specific needs and vulnerabilities of Somalis and how such a change in the constitution now will impact them today and in the future is essential for that. I urge a prioritization as well of legislations currently awaiting cabinet endorsement, which Somalia has also committed to adopting by the end of 2024, such as the Sexual Offenses and Indecency Bill, as well as the Anti-FGM Bill. They are just basic entry points for accountability and protection, and should be treated as interim until Somalia develops more robust legal safeguards for the rights and well-being of women and children. Madam President, just a few weeks ago, in Puntland state of Somalia, 4 young men were executed for crimes they committed while they were all under the age of 18. And this is not an isolated case, just a recent one. Somalia must consolidate its approach on prosecution of children associated with armed groups designated as terrorist organizations, bring detention conditions and access to legal services into compliance with international human rights standards, and ensure fair trials and due process rights of all persons suspected of committing crimes. Somalia has since 2012 been developing the mechanisms on the treatment and handling of children in armed conflict and making notable progress towards implementing its roadmap on ending and preventing recruitment and use of children. The age assessment guidelines and its standardized checklist, which the government endorsed in 2023, is a key milestone for Somalia that will continue to strengthen compliance on this agenda. The progress in the Child Rights Bill and Juvenile Justice Bill similarly indicate the tangible efforts being made by the Somali government. Implementation is crucial. These existing mechanisms, if followed and implemented, offer alternative pathways that hold minors accountable for crimes such as rehabilitation programs and juvenile detention. I have witnessed firsthand how the implementation of these mechanisms not only safeguards children throughout their reintegration, but also has significant implications for transitional justice and the prevention of violent extremism. These efforts foster proactive and comprehensive joint action for conflict prevention between governments and civil society, creating a stronger, more resilient community. By prioritizing the protection and reintegration of children, we lay the groundwork for lasting peace and stability. The Elman Peace Center has worked for decades on these issues. Our Drop the Gun, Pick Up the Pen campaign, started in the 90s and lauded as Somalia's first disarmament program, initiated and led by the community, continues to this day. And with great collaboration with the Child Protection Screening Unit of the Ministry of Internal Security and UNICEF, we have been actively working to support children associated with armed forces and groups. And as the Somali government progresses in implementing non-judicial measures for children associated with armed groups and accelerates the handovers of these children from custody, similar advancements are expected from the international community and United Nations agencies tasked with this agenda. The lack of resource and support for children in armed conflict in Somalia is unacceptable, particularly as the government conducts more military operations and subsequently encounters more children and is increasingly expediting the release from detention into child-friendly care. Civil society is struggling to meet the resulting demand with the current funding allocated for child protection and armed conflict programming. With budget allocations and mandate renewals heavily focused on military spending, it is imperative to assess the proportion of these funds dedicated to child protection, social safety nets, resilience, and sustainable peace. Madam President, last month, the Elman Peace Center hosted a Women's Peace Forum in Mogadishu, and we brought together over 100 women leaders from across all federal member states in Somalia. We were honored by the presence of His Excellency General Bashir Mohammed Jama, the Minister of Family Affairs and Human Rights and Development, the EU Ambassador, and other distinguished guests to discuss the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1325. Women, including young leaders from newly liberated areas like Bahdo and Burtinle, delivered a powerful call for meaningful participation in peace processes. They presented actionable recommendations, including the urgent need to abandon the limiting narrative that confines women's role to soft security positions, thereby preventing their full participation across all pillars of 1325. The misuse of weapons, particularly in fueling gender-based violence, demands accountability and transparency in the flow of arms. Yet disarmament and arms control are insufficiently integrated into 1325 action plans. A gender-sensitive approach to disarmament anchored in a strong normative framework could be transformative for Somalia if systematically implemented. Somalia's nascent and fragile peace cannot be sustained in an environment where the general populace is excluded from the processes that ensure their well-being. Madam President, esteemed colleagues, this briefing comes at a pivotal moment for Somalia. As the country prepares to take a seat on the Security Council next year, we must recognize that sustainable peace requires a bottom-up approach, one that is internally driven, culturally rooted, and locally facilitated. This vision for a sustainable peace in Somalia cannot be realized with the active and meaningful participation of the majority of its population, which is youth and women. I urge the members of this council to not only support the call for inclusive peace processes in Somalia, but to contribute concretely to its realization. This can be achieved through dedicated resources, seconding Somali expertise, and deploying specialists on critical issues like women, peace, and security, on children and armed conflict, especially as Somalia prepares for its Security Council seat. I also recommend strengthening the Somalia mission's engagement with Somali civil society organizations for more accurate, timely community analysis and deeper cooperation. Many CSOs, including myself, are very eager to collaborate with the mission to provide on-the-ground insights that can inform effective peace-building strategies. Additionally, I urge member states to move beyond expressions of solidarity and provide the financial and technical support necessary to sustain Somalia's progress. This includes allocating resources for peace-building functions and ensuring that the mandates related to peace, security, and human rights are well-resourced and effectively implemented. Close collaboration with CSOs is vital for this, to ensure that peace-building is inclusive, locally driven, and aligned with the needs of the Somali communities. Thank you for your attention.
Je remercie Madame Elman.
I thank Ms. Elman for her briefing.